On Russian state television and across the vast digital landscape it controls, the story is simple, relentless, and clear. It is a story of heroes. Every news broadcast, every talk show panel reinforces the same message. We see soldiers portrayed not as invaders, but as liberators and protectors, returning from the front lines in Ukraine. The narrative is meticulously crafted for maximum emotional impact. They are met with bouquets of flowers and carefully choreographed tears of joy from wives and mothers. They are met with firm, official handshakes from local politicians, a symbol of the state's gratitude. Cameras glide through sunlit town squares, capturing staged reunions where confetti drifts through the air like snow. In grand Kremlin halls and modest provincial offices, medals are pinned to chests, each one a testament to valor. Putin's propaganda machine works tirelessly, a multi-billion ruble enterprise dedicated to constructing this singular narrative. It paints a picture of noble warriors defending the motherland, returning to a grateful and unified nation. It is a clean, heroic, triumphant story, carefully constructed, edited, and broadcast to every corner of the country. But this story, like the television studio it's filmed in, is a facade. When the bright lights are switched off and the cameras are packed away, a different, far darker reality emerges. It's a reality that exists in the shadows of those same sunlit squares, in the quiet desperation of cramped apartments, and in the neglected corners of a nation fixated on victory. This is the untelevised story of profound and lasting damage, a human-created catastrophe that reveals the true staggering price of Putin's war. The cost is not just the billions of rubles diverted from hospitals and schools to be spent on tanks and missiles. It is not just the official, heavily censored casualty numbers from the battlefield. The true cost is measured in the slow-motion collapse of society itself. It's a hidden epidemic of trauma, a generation of men returning not as heroes, but as broken individuals. The violence they were trained to inflict on the front is being imported back into their own homes and onto their own streets. And the very system that sent them to fight, that promised them glory, is now utterly failing to heal them. This investigation will look beyond the Kremlin's polished narrative. Using official data, independent reporting, and first-hand accounts, we will piece together the reality that propaganda is designed to conceal. We will examine the deep scars left on veterans' lives and the burgeoning mental health crisis the state refuses to acknowledge. We will track the alarming rise in violent crime and the emergence of a two-tier society that rewards loyalty with impunity. We will analyze the long-term consequences of a war economy and a demographic cliff that threatens Russia's future. This is the story of the war after the war, the story of a nation devouring itself from the inside out. The Kremlin reports large numbers of returning soldiers. By mid-2025, nearly 140,000 had returned to civilian life. This isn't a trickle. It's a steady, relentless stream of men returning from the front lines. And with each rotation, the number grows, seeding a vast and troubled population back into the heart of the country. The initial invasion force was around 300,000, meaning a significant portion of the original fighters are now a growing veteran population living within Russian society. State media touts reintegration and social adaptation programs. On television, they showcase gleaming new rehabilitation centers and promise comprehensive support, job placement, psychological counseling, a hero's welcome. The language is clinical, bureaucratic terms meant to reassure and project control. But away from the cameras, in the provincial towns and forgotten villages where most soldiers return, these promises evaporate. The reality is a social disaster in the making. For the vast majority, returning home is not an end to their battle, but the beginning of a new, more solitary one. For many, returning is no simple transition. They come back with profound physical and psychological injuries. The physical wounds are often the most visible, the price of their discharge. Bodies permanently altered by violence, a lost limb, a face reconstructed, a body riddled with shrapnel. These are the tangible markers of their service. The very injuries that discharge them make normal life near impossible. But it's the invisible wounds that fester, poisoning their return to a world that no longer makes sense. Many return to rural towns with a payout and a hollow promise. 4 million rubles, about $35,000, can exceed a year's contract pay. It's a life-changing sum for someone from a poor region. But the money often disappears quickly, on medical bills not covered by the state, on paying off debts, or simply on the daily cost of living for a man who can no longer work. But money alone cannot heal deep wounds. It cannot erase traumatic memories, nor provide the long-term care that is desperately needed, and Russia is catastrophically unprepared to provide it. The state's own figures paint a grim picture. Russia's defense ministry estimates 1 in 5 veterans suffer from PTSD. Independent analysts believe the true number is far higher, perhaps closer to 1 in 3, when accounting for depression and severe anxiety. These are not just statistics, they are men haunted by what they have seen and done. Intense anxiety, uncontrollable anger, emotional numbness, terrifying flashbacks. The system meant to help them is broken. Fewer than 1 therapist for 7,000 adults, and almost none are trained for combat trauma. In rural areas, that ratio can be as high as 1 for every 20,000. The concept of specialized trauma care is for most a foreign luxury. Stigma keeps many silent, suffering hidden from view. In a culture that prizes stoicism, asking for help is often seen as a final humiliation, so they suffer in silence. Alcohol becomes an easy, destructive coping mechanism. Vodka to numb the memories, to quiet the rage. Drugs too. And increasingly cheap synthetic drugs offer a more potent escape. It fuels aggression, destroys relationships, deepens despair. Domestic violence rates are reportedly surging. Families already strained are breaking under the pressure. A hero's return becomes a family's nightmare, a crisis the state seems unable or unwilling to address. The violence of the battlefield is not staying in Ukraine. It's a contagion, carried home in the minds of the very men sent to fight. After months immersed in a world where aggression is survival, the switch cannot simply be turned off. The trauma and the training bleed into civilian life, and the first to feel the consequences are those closest to them. An explosion of veteran-related crime is sweeping the country. Independent media reports a dramatic rise in murders and violent assaults. Most victims are relatives, friends, and neighbors turning homes into new front lines. This pattern is especially acute in provincial towns, where local police are unequipped to handle individuals conditioned by extreme violence and suffering from untreated trauma. There are grim parallels to the Afghansi, veterans of the Soviet-Afghan War. But today, the scale is exponentially larger. An estimated 1.5 to 2 million have served in Ukraine. This isn't a distant conflict fought by professionals. It's a mass mobilization that has touched every corner of the nation, creating a social wound far deeper and wider than anything seen before. The situation was made catastrophically worse by recruiting directly from prisons. First Wagner and later the Defense Ministry offered pardons to violent criminals for a tour of duty. Tens of thousands were released, trained in combat, and then returned to society. Unsurprisingly, organized crime syndicates are eagerly recruiting these men. They are a ready-made pool of experienced killers and enforcers, already operating outside the law and now armed with military skills. Perfect foot soldiers for expanding criminal enterprises. This creates a two-tiered justice system. Across the country, judges show unprecedented leniency for veterans, citing service to the motherland as a mitigating factor. Even in murder cases, sentences are drastically reduced. This official forgiveness sends a clear message. Service in Ukraine provides a shield from accountability. A dangerous sense of impunity takes root. As a result, ordinary citizens feel increasingly unprotected, their faith in the rule of law eroding with every verdict. This two-tier system extends deep into the economy. Russia runs a war economy that lavishes benefits on soldiers while impoverishing everyone else. Defense spending has ballooned to 7.5% of GDP, consuming 40% of the federal budget. To pay for it, vital social programs are gutted. Transfers to the pension fund were cut by 1.4 trillion rubles. While soldiers and their families gain preferential access to housing and loans, others face inflation and closed doors. In depressed regions, high military salaries and bonuses make enlistment the only rational choice, ensuring a steady supply of manpower. Meanwhile, the military-industrial complex, energy trade, and connected elites reap enormous profits. This creates a powerful, self-perpetuating cycle. The war fuels the economy, which provides the resources to continue the war. Peace would expose the model's fundamental hollowness and force a reckoning with its devastating social costs. Even before the war, Russia faced a demographic decline. Fertility has long been below replacement. The war poured gasoline on a slow-burning crisis, a demographic hole that may take decades to fill. Western estimates approach 1 million killed and wounded by early 2025. The dead won't become fathers. The wounded may not work or start families. The Army now represents roughly 3% of the labor force. Healthcare, education, manufacturing, short-staffed and strained. A smaller workforce means lower output and a shrinking tax base. Fewer workers support more retirees. Pressure mounts. The already small 1990s cohort is being decimated. This is not a temporary sacrifice, it is permanent demographic damage. The decay remains hidden behind propaganda and legal repression. A speech law chills reporting. Even victims fear to speak. Silence lets problems fester in the dark. The state blames individuals, not its own policies. A war economy creates a military caste dependent on conflict. From over 200,000 rubles to 50,000, an impossible adjustment. Low-wage stopgaps push men back to the only employer that values them. Politically, a disaffected armed class can demand further expansionism. Hospitals for tanks, teachers for soldiers, the future traded for short-term gains. The war is fought in Russian homes, clinics, and schools. Its consequences will cast a long shadow over Russia's future. War funds the budget, justifies power, and acts as an opiate. The social contract risks collapse. Poorer, sicker, more violent, and weaker. The victory sought in Ukraine may cost Russia itself. The cameras may be off, but the damage is ongoing. The final bill has yet to come due. For deep, independent coverage of global conflicts, subscribe to The Military Show and consider supporting our work.